We have come so far, but we still have a long way to go. So, why is LGBTQIA plus visibility still so important?
Yeah, look, that is a really important question because I think a lot of people in the broader community have sort of said, well, things have changed so much. You've got a lot of young people who are so much more comfortable with the fluidity of sexuality, of gender identity. You've got marriage equality, so and I hear that all the time from people who say to me, but things are good now, and yet actually still our communities are severely overrepresented in mental illness. Our young people are severely overrepresented in attempted suicides.
Yes.
50% of LGBTIQ people in Victoria say that they are not out in the workplace. So there's still a long way to go. Yes, we've come so far, but there's
Yeah.
still a lot to do. There was actually a really major research project that was done by a university. It was only released in 2019, which, just before COVID, so there wasn't a lot of talk about this last year.
Yeah.
But it was a national survey, and not just looking at LGBTIQ. It was looking at refugees, it was looking at First Nations, disability, and it found that 1 in 6 Australians, and it was a very broad sample, 1 in 6 Australians are still heavily, and say that they are highly prejudiced against LGBTIQ people. And the
Right.
same 1 in 6 say that they don't know anyone who is LGBTIQ, which of course is possibly not probably not possible. They
Yeah.
must know someone, but they haven't recognised that. They haven't got a personal connection. And so that visibility of sharing stories and the other thing that a lot of research tells us is that prejudice is changed, or the greatest way to change prejudice is for people to make a personal, you can't hit someone over the head about it and tell them that they
Yes.
shouldn't be that way. It's about making a personal connection, and that's what stories are about. That's what
Yes.
people actually sharing their experience, allowing people to get to know them, and that's why visibility for our communities is really, really important.
And I hope we can provide that. I am reaching out to some people who, identify as all different, types of genders and things, because I want to hear their lived experience, and I want our audience to hear that, so that they hear that story and they think that is a human being with real feelings, just like me, and they are living this experience, and that's unfair, or they need to be loved just like anybody else. So I'm absolutely there with you. And we just had we've just had this week, well, not this week, but by the time this goes to air, but the soccer player, Josh
Yep,
Cavallo.
yep. From
And it,
Adelaide.
oh, yes, Adelaide boy, close to your heart. And
Absolutely.
it's bittersweet. It's bitter because
Yeah.
it's
And
like,
the sad thing there, because absolutely I read that, I celebrated that. The
yeah,
really sad thing is that there are so few elite sports people. The reason that hit the news was because Josh was the only out, a premier soccer player.
yes, yes,
But that you can translate that to a whole lot of other elite sports, and
absolutely. I
that
remember
I still
saying,
find really, really sad. That
yeah, I remember talking to my brothers about AFL years ago, and we were trying to put a year on it. We're saying, what year will an AFL player finally come out? Like, how long will it take? And I can't remember what year we came up with it, but I am hoping that Josh Cavallo opens the doors for so many other athletes. Okay?
Yeah, and I think they're starting to get a recognition in a broader sense in workplaces, because a lot of these elite sports, they are workplaces. Workplaces in general are just starting to grapple with the fact that to get their best work out of people, people need to be able to be themselves.
Yes.
I think elite sport is still quite a way behind that, and I wonder if because a lot of that is around the persona that sports people have to generate to make money, because there's not necessarily, although some sports there is quite a lot of money in it.
But isn't it interesting that AFL women, they are openly gay or whatever they are, and then, but for men, it's a different world.
Yeah, I think that's because AFLW came from grassroots. Those same players have been out in community sport for a very long time. And there doesn't seem to be the same barriers in a lot of community sport. There's a lot of out gay players, a lot of gender diverse players in community sport. But AFL has sort of been in that elite for a very long time, whereas AFL really came from the grassroots.
Yeah.
AFLW came from this grassroots.
Yeah.
And you can't, those players were not going to go back in the closet.
No. Well, there was nearly, who was it? Was it a cricketer or a footballer? I can't remember. They posted something about celebrating their birthday with their parent and their partner, and then they quickly changed the wording or something like that. I can't remember who it was.
And I think that's important to note, because having just said that about, AFLW players, we still see so many talk about the homophobic harassment that they get from crowds at games, and some have been driven from the game because of that. Yes. There's been a lot of sports players who, as you say, have been celebrating on social media about the birth of their children, and been, really attacked with hate messages. And again, this is a really good way to highlight the long way we've still got to go for members of our diverse communities to still feel safe.
Sure. So, Karen, can you explain to us what marginalised intersectional groups are?
Sure. And again, I think it probably comes from that sense that no person is just one thing.
Yeah.
I think in a broader sense, there's about 18% of the broader population that live with disability. So, of course, it makes sense that there are members of LGBTIQ communities who live with a disability or hearing impaired or sight impaired, because, again, not everyone identifies with the term disabled. Or they might know somebody who is within those cohorts or have family members within those cohorts. And yet, a lot of times that people are focusing on events for a particular group, like LGBTIQ, there's not a lot of time or effort or money spent on going, okay, well, how do we make sure all of those intersections are welcome? And also, for a lot of, in a broader sense, it's not just about Pride events and Midsumma. There's a lot of events in general and a lot of arts events where there's not a lot of seniors who attend. Yes. There is a point where people tend to stop going to things, or that people with young children go, I used to love going to that, but I can't go with my young children. Yeah. Or it's just not accessible. An outdoor event where the grass isn't cut doesn't work for a wheelchair. Yes. There's so many little things like that I wouldn't have thought of that until we really kind of went into, okay, so if there's such a large portion of our communities who identify as living with a disability or hearing impaired, sight impaired, what are the barriers to them attending? It's not always things like, okay, we'll have it Auslan interpreted and we'll have it captioned and we'll have audio description, and those things are really important. And a lot of those communities don't get the regularity of that, so they don't trust those things are going to happen. But then it's things like, okay, the event's in a park, it's grass. Is the grass cut enough? Are there areas that are going to be easy to navigate if you're in a wheelchair? Are there ramps so that it's easy to get up and down from the curbs? Yes. What are all of those other things? For some members of the communities that we spoke to, they would say, well, they had not been going to a lot of events, so it was more about confidence. If they were sight impaired, what were they going to experience when they got there? Were they going to get knocked over by crowds? How could we prepare and provide information about what they could expect and trust well before the event, so they could get that information, they could think about it, they could go, okay, do I need a support person or not? Okay, I can use this particular public transport to get there, or this access cab, and they can drop me off at this place. And if I go here, I'm not going to be in the midst of crowds that's going to make it difficult. And so I think it really is about kind of going, okay, what are all of the different needs? We'll never capture them all, and we're always learning. Yes. But what are all the different needs of our different parts of our communities that are going to make people feel comfortable? Another example is, we, for our seniors and also some people in our community who might be impacted by audio or visual stimulation, is to have a quiet tea tent.
I was just about to say, what about people with anxiety and all that sort of stuff? Yeah, a chill out space is really important. Yeah,
and for seniors, a place where they can sit down and actually sit. Because, a party that's designed, or a site where most people are standing up all day, not necessarily conducive if you're tired and your legs are aching. And I don't consider myself necessarily old, but my legs can get pretty achy after a day.
You need a good sit down, yeah.
You do. So it's kind of really going, okay, what are those things that we can do that are going to make this experience enjoyable for people? And, we have a lot of intersectional marginalised groups who are more marginalised. All of our communities are marginalised to a certain extent, but if you come from LGBTIQ and disability, LGBTIQ and you're a refugee, if you're First Nations, those complexities are going to add to that experience and mean that you're going to be looking for maybe some other things to make that experience feel like it's for you.
Yeah.